Have you ever watched someone take away something that rightfully belonged to you? Have you ever been treated as though your home, your family, and your future no longer mattered? Most people would have accepted their fate. Some would have walked away. But one woman chose to challenge the greatest empire the world had ever known. Her name was Boudica. Long before Rome feared her, Boudica was a queen, a wife, and a mother. She ruled alongside her husband, King Prasutagus, over the Iceni, a proud Celtic tribe that lived across what is now eastern England. Very little is known about her early life. Ancient historians recorded neither her exact birthplace nor the year she was born. Yet one description has survived. The Roman historian Cassius Dio wrote that she was unusually tall, with long reddish-brown hair, a powerful voice, and a commanding presence that inspired those around her. She was a leader people naturally followed. The Iceni lived close to the land. They raised livestock, farmed fertile fields, and honored the traditions of their ancestors. They were fierce warriors when necessary, but they also valued family, loyalty, and freedom. Unlike many societies of the ancient world, Celtic women could hold positions of influence and authority. For Boudica, leadership meant protecting both her people and her family. Together, she and Prasutagus had 2 daughters, and they hoped to leave behind a peaceful kingdom for them to inherit. But peace in Britain had become increasingly fragile. In 43 AD, the Roman Emperor Claudius invaded Britain, gradually bringing much of the island under Roman control. Some tribes resisted. Others chose cooperation. The Iceni followed the second path. Prasutagus ruled as a client king, governing his people while recognizing Roman authority. It was a practical compromise. The Iceni kept much of their independence, while Rome avoided another costly war. For years, the arrangement seemed to work. Boudica believed that peace would protect her people from unnecessary suffering. She could not have known that the empire she chose not to fight would soon destroy everything she held dear. Because sometimes, the greatest wars begin, not with an invasion, but with a broken promise. 4 years, the agreement between Rome and the Iceni held. It was never a partnership of equals, but it brought stability. As long as King Prasutagus remained alive, his people retained a measure of independence. Knowing Rome's appetite for expansion, Prasutagus tried to protect his kingdom even after his death. In his will, he divided his estate between the Roman Emperor Nero and his 2 daughters. He hoped the arrangement would satisfy Rome while preserving his family's rule over the Iceni. Instead, it achieved the opposite. When Prasutagus died, Roman officials ignored his wishes completely. They declared that the Iceni kingdom no longer existed. Its lands were seized. Its property was confiscated. Powerful nobles lost their wealth. Ordinary families lost their homes. Everything the Iceni had built was now treated as the property of Rome. Then came the act that changed history. Boudica protested. She demanded that Rome honor the agreement it had accepted. The Roman response was swift and brutal. According to the Roman historian Tacitus, Boudica was publicly flogged. Her 2 daughters were assaulted by Roman soldiers. Whether every detail happened exactly as recorded, historians agree that Roman abuses against the Iceni sparked one of the greatest uprisings in Britain's history. For Boudica, this was no longer about politics. It was about justice, about family, about dignity. The queen who had chosen peace had been shown none in return. Word of Rome's actions spread quickly across Britain. The Iceni were not the only tribe carrying resentment. Many had grown tired of heavy taxes, confiscated land, and the arrogance of Roman officials. Boudica's suffering became their rallying cry. One by one, neighboring tribes pledged their support. Old rivalries were set aside. Thousands of warriors answered her call. What had begun as a personal tragedy was becoming something far greater. It was becoming a rebellion. And standing before an army unlike any Britain had seen in years, Boudica made her choice. She would not ask Rome for justice. She would take it herself. Raising an army was one thing. Uniting Britain was another. The Celtic tribes had lived as independent peoples for generations. Each defended its own lands. Each followed its own leaders. Old rivalries often mattered more than common interests. Rome understood this. As long as the tribes remained divided, they could be conquered one by one. Boudica intended to change that. She traveled across eastern Britain, calling upon tribal leaders to look beyond their differences. This was no longer just the struggle of the Iceni. It was the struggle of every people who had lost land, freedom, or loved ones under Roman rule. Ancient historians describe Boudica addressing enormous gatherings from her war chariot. Standing before thousands of warriors, she reminded them of what Rome had taken from them: their homes, their wealth, their traditions, their dignity. She did not promise an easy victory. She promised something far more powerful: the chance to fight as free people. Her words spread like wildfire. The Trinovans, long resentful of Roman rule, became some of her earliest supporters. Soon, other tribes joined the uprising. Within a remarkably short time, Boudica had assembled an army that ancient sources claimed numbered in the tens of thousands. Many were experienced warriors. Others were farmers, craftsmen, and ordinary men who had never fought in a great battle before. They came for different reasons. Some wanted revenge. Some wanted justice. Others simply wanted their homeland back. Meanwhile, Rome was dangerously unprepared. The Roman governor, Gaius Suetonius Paulinus, was leading a military campaign far away in western Britain, attacking the island of Mona, a stronghold of the Druids. With much of the Roman army absent, eastern Britain was left vulnerable. Boudica recognized the opportunity immediately. She knew that speed would be her greatest weapon. If the rebellion struck before Rome could regroup, entire Roman settlements might fall before help could arrive. Her first target was no accident. It was a city that represented Roman power more than any other. A colony built for retired Roman soldiers. A place where native Britons had been pushed aside to make room for an empire. Its name was Camulodunum. And before long, the first flames of Boudica's rebellion would rise into the sky. The first target of Boudica's rebellion was Camulodunum, now known as Colchester. It was more than a Roman settlement. It was a symbol of Roman domination in Britain. The city had been built for retired Roman soldiers, many of whom had taken land from the local tribes. To the Britons, Camulodunum stood as a daily reminder that their homeland was no longer truly their own. Despite growing reports of unrest, Roman officials underestimated the danger. Some dismissed the warnings completely. Others believed a handful of soldiers would be enough to keep order. They were disastrously mistaken. Boudica's army descended upon the city with overwhelming force. The Roman defenders were too few to stop them. Desperate civilians fled toward the Temple of Claudius, one of the strongest buildings in the settlement, hoping its thick walls would protect them. For 2 days, they held out. Then the temple fell. Camulodunum was consumed by fire. Buildings collapsed. Statues of Roman emperors were pulled down. The city that had represented Rome's authority in Britain was reduced to ruins. When news of the disaster reached nearby Roman forces, a detachment from the 9th Legion marched to relieve the city. They never arrived. Boudica's warriors ambushed them before they could reach Camulodunum. The Roman infantry was overwhelmed, and many soldiers were killed. Only a small number of cavalry escaped the slaughter. It was one of Rome's worst defeats in Britain. Panic spread rapidly through the province. For the first time since the invasion of Britain, Rome no longer appeared invincible. The rebellion gathered even greater momentum. More warriors joined Boudica's army, believing that the empire could finally be defeated. Meanwhile, Governor Gaius Suetonius Paulinus abandoned his campaign in western Britain and hurried east. But he faced an impossible decision. He did not have enough soldiers to defend every Roman settlement. He would have to choose what could be saved, and what must be sacrificed. His decision would seal the fate of Britain's newest Roman city, Londinium. As Governor Gaius Suetonius Paulinus marched east, he reached the growing Roman settlement of Londinium, modern-day London. Although it was still a young city, Londinium had already become one of Britain's most important centers of trade. Merchants from across the empire filled its streets. Warehouses stood along the River Thames. Its future seemed bright. But Suetonius faced a harsh reality. He had only a small force. Far too few soldiers to defend the city against Boudica's enormous army. After carefully assessing the situation, he made one of the hardest decisions of his career. He abandoned Londinium. Before leaving, he ordered anyone who could travel to evacuate with the army. Many escaped. Many others chose to remain, believing the Romans would return before the rebels arrived. They were wrong. Soon afterward, Boudica's warriors entered the city. Londinium was set ablaze. Homes, markets, workshops, and public buildings disappeared beneath towering flames. The thriving settlement was almost completely destroyed. But Boudica was not finished. Her army continued north to Verulamium, another prosperous Roman town. It too suffered the same fate. By the time the rebellion reached its peak, 3 of Roman Britain's most important settlements had been destroyed. Ancient historians claimed that tens of thousands of people lost their lives during the uprising, though the exact number remains uncertain. Smoke rose across southeastern Britain. Entire communities lay in ruins. For a brief moment, it seemed as though Rome was losing its grip on the island. Yet beneath the ashes, Suetonius was preparing his response. He knew he could not match Boudica's numbers. But he also knew that battles are not always won by the largest army. They are won by leadership, discipline, and choosing the right ground. Somewhere along a narrow stretch of road in Britain, the Roman governor prepared to make his final stand. And the fate of the rebellion would soon be decided in a single battle. Sometime in 60 or 61 AD, Boudica's rebellion reached its defining moment. The exact location of the battlefield remains unknown, but historians believe Governor Gaius Suetonius Paulinus deliberately chose a narrow position, backed by woodland, where his smaller army could not be surrounded. It was a battlefield designed to cancel the rebels' greatest advantage: numbers. Suetonius commanded around 10,000 Roman soldiers. Boudica's army may have numbered many times that, although ancient estimates were almost certainly exaggerated. Whatever the true figures, the Britons vastly outnumbered the Romans. Confident after destroying 3 Roman cities, Boudica addressed her warriors before the battle. According to the historian Tacitus, she reminded them that they were fighting not only for victory, but for their freedom, their families, and their homeland. Then the battle began. The Britons charged forward in a massive wave, hoping to overwhelm the Roman line through sheer force. But the narrow battlefield prevented them from bringing their full numbers into the fight. The disciplined Roman soldiers held their formation. When the rebels came within range, thousands of Roman javelins flew through the air. The front ranks of Boudica's army staggered under the attack. Then the Roman infantry advanced. Moving in their famous wedge formation, they pushed relentlessly into the crowded Britons. Protected by armor, shields, and years of training, the Roman legionaries steadily forced the rebels backward. Soon, the battlefield dissolved into chaos. Ancient accounts describe wagons carrying the families of the Britons, positioned behind their army so they could witness the expected victory. Instead, those wagons trapped the retreat. As panic spread, escape became almost impossible. The rebellion collapsed. Ancient historians claimed that tens of thousands of Britons were killed, though the true number will never be known. Roman losses were far smaller. It was a devastating defeat. Boudica escaped the battlefield. After that, history falls silent. The Roman historian Tacitus wrote that she took poison rather than be captured. Another ancient writer, Cassius Dio, claimed she died from illness shortly afterward. The truth has been lost with time. What is certain is that Boudica disappeared from history almost as suddenly as she had emerged. Her rebellion had ended. Rome remained the master of Britain, or so it seemed, because although the empire had won the battle, it would never erase the memory of the queen who had forced Rome to fight for its own survival. The rebellion was over. Rome had survived. But victory came at an enormous cost. 3 major Roman settlements had been destroyed. Thousands of soldiers and civilians had lost their lives. Large parts of southeastern Britain had been left in ruins. For the Roman Empire, Boudica's uprising was more than a military crisis. It was a warning. Even the greatest empire in the world could be shaken when injustice pushed ordinary people beyond their limits. After crushing the rebellion, Rome strengthened its military presence across Britain. New forts were built. More soldiers were stationed throughout the province. At the same time, Roman officials also realized that harsh treatment of the native tribes could provoke another disaster. In the years that followed, the empire adopted a more cautious approach toward governing Britain. Boudica had failed to drive Rome from the island. Yet she had forced the empire to change. Remarkably, almost everything we know about Boudica comes from Roman historians, particularly Tacitus and Cassius Dio. No writings from Boudica herself have survived. No monuments were built in her honor during her lifetime. Even so, her story refused to disappear. Century after century, she became a symbol of courage, freedom, and resistance against oppression. Today, her bronze statue stands beside the Palace of Westminster in London, overlooking the city that once burned during her rebellion. It serves as a reminder that history is not remembered only through victories. Sometimes, it is remembered through courage. Boudica never conquered Rome. She never lived to see Britain free from Roman rule. But she achieved something that few people ever do. She made one of history's greatest empires fear the determination of a single woman. More than 19 centuries have passed since her final battle. The Roman Empire has long since vanished. Its forts have crumbled. Its legions are gone. Yet the name Boudica still lives on. Not because she won, but because when everything she loved was taken from her, she refused to bow before the most powerful empire on earth. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the remarkable story of Boudica. If you enjoyed this documentary, don't forget to subscribe, so we can continue uncovering the forgotten stories that shaped our world. Until next time, take care and keep your curiosity alive.